Vikings fans, take a deep breath because the Vikings day came loaded. There's a heated discussion surrounding the latest trade proposal that could fix the glaring issue in this offense. There's major movement behind the scenes tied to the arrival of a veteran. And right in the middle of all that, an inside source reveals that an AFC executive is now among the top candidates for the Vikings general manager job. And when all three of those things hit at the same time, you know this isn't just another quiet off-season update. One thing became crystal clear after this latest Vikings development. This offense still feels like it's missing something, and I think a lot of people in Minnesota realize that at the exact same time, because when you look at the offensive structure right now, there's plenty of top-end talent already in place, but there's still that missing piece who can absorb pressure once defenses start doubling the main weapons in the middle of games. That's exactly why this Xavier Legette conversation has started picking up steam. And hold on, because I already know part of the fan base is looking at his numbers in Carolina and saying, he's not worth all that. Honestly, the numbers themselves don't scare anybody. He finished last season with 35 catches, 363 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's not the production of someone walking in with superstar status. But context matters a lot in this league. A whole lot. Carolina turned into offensive chaos at several points. Constant rhythm changes, stalled drives, quarterbacks under pressure non-stop. The entire situation hurt his development. And even with that, you can still see the physical explosiveness, the ability after the catch, and that aggressive profile Kevin O'Connell likes to use across intermediate routes. That is why this cannot just be judged from a stat sheet. The most interesting part of this story is the possible trade cost. Some people believe 2 fifth-round picks could get this done. And that changes the entire conversation, because there's a big difference between giving up major draft capital and taking a low-risk swing on a player who still has a really intriguing physical ceiling. At that point, it starts looking like a smart move. Meanwhile, the Vikings offense enters a very interesting phase with Kyler Murray arriving on a 1-year deal. Because Murray needs offensive depth. He operates best when he can spread the ball out quickly. And honestly, relying only on Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison all season long would be asking for trouble sooner or later. One injury, one cold stretch, one defense taking away the first read, and suddenly this offense starts shrinking fast. Another important part of this is Legette's playing style. The Vikings don't necessarily need another superstar. They need somebody who forces opposing defenses to respect the other side of the field. And that changes how defenses play you. It changes coverage looks. It even creates more space for the running game. Now, is there risk involved? Of course there is. Carolina might still want to keep developing him. Maybe he never becomes the player they hope for on draft night. But this is exactly the type of gamble smart teams make when they're trying to climb back to the top of the NFC without blowing up the salary cap. And let me say something very directly here. This move makes way more sense than throwing insane money at a WR3 just because of market hype. Because if Minnesota gets this right, the offense jumps an entire level without sacrificing financial flexibility. And that kind of balance matters when a team is trying to win now and still protect itself later. This story gets even more interesting once you start seeing what's happening behind the scenes inside the organization. Let me know in the comments if you'd make this trade for Xavier Legette, or if you'd rather target somebody else for this offense. While most of the fan base was focused on offense, the draft, and quarterbacks, a major development started gaining serious traction behind the scenes in Minnesota. And this could impact the future of the franchise just as much as signing a star player, because the search for a new general manager has officially become real. And one name immediately climbed near the top of that list: Terrence Gray. Now this is where things get really interesting. The guy isn't some random outsider showing up out of nowhere. Gray worked in Minnesota for 11 years before heading to Buffalo. He knows the structure. He knows people inside the building. He understands how the organization operates. That matters, especially when a franchise is trying to change direction without tearing everything apart. And ever since he joined the Bills, his reputation across the league has only grown stronger. Right now, he's Buffalo's assistant general manager. And we're not talking about some executive sitting far away from important decisions. According to multiple insiders, Terrence Gray is involved in all the major choices inside that organization. Draft picks, free agency, contract extensions, roster construction. He's involved in everything. And let's be honest here, when somebody rises through the ranks in Buffalo over the past several years, the entire league pays attention, because the Bills have become one of the NFL's most consistent organizations when it comes to building a roster. The detail that stands out the most is the type of structure Minnesota appears to be considering right now. It doesn't look like the Vikings want to hand complete power to one person anymore. The vibe feels more strategic, almost like a shared leadership model between executives, scouting, and the coaching staff. And that connects directly to Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores, because there's a growing belief that both of them had major influence over recent draft decisions, especially Flores on the defensive side. So maybe Minnesota is trying to create a structure where coaching and the front office are even more connected moving forward. That sounds simple, but in the NFL, that can decide whether a rebuild actually works. To be completely honest here, I think that can work really well if the egos stay under control, because when this type of setup fails, it turns into internal warfare. But when it clicks, things move faster inside the building. Another important piece here is Rob Brzezinski. A lot of people inside the building have enormous respect for him. The guy understands contracts, salary cap management, and the internal workings of the franchise better than almost anyone. So now there's growing buzz about keeping Brzezinski in a major leadership role while somebody like Terrence Gray handles the heavier scouting and player evaluation side of things. And honestly, this feels like a very modern NFL move. The Vikings are clearly trying to avoid internal dysfunction. Ownership values stability a lot, really a lot. And after watching talented teams collapse because of power struggles, it's easy to understand why. Now imagine combining that with a roster still trying to climb back to the top of the NFC. Suddenly, every decision carries extra weight. Every signing matters. Every mistake could delay the project by 2 years. And you know what makes this even more important? Terrence Gray's name keeps growing around the league. He's interviewed with the Raiders, Titans, Chargers. Teams have been tracking him for a while now. So if Minnesota really wants him, this may not be a name they can sit on forever. But the next story in this breakdown might impact the Vikings offense even more, because one negotiation has started cooling off because of money, and that could push Minnesota toward a very familiar veteran name around the NFL. The temperature surrounding the Vikings' search for a third wide receiver has completely changed over the past few days, and it changed fast, because a visit that once looked extremely promising started losing momentum once the money demands hit the table. And that's when Minnesota may have realized they were entering a very dangerous financial battle. The name at the center of all this is Jauan Jennings. Minnesota recently hosted him. The conversation happened. The interest was very real. But then reports started surfacing that Jennings is looking for WR2 money. And now we're talking about something in the range of $15 to $20 million per season. That's where things get complicated. Really complicated. Because there's a difference between paying huge money for someone who completely changes the ceiling of your offense and committing that type of money to a WR3 while the team still has future questions at quarterback, tight end, and overall offensive structure heading into next offseason. That is the kind of decision that can look exciting in July and painful by next March. And that's exactly when another very interesting option started gaining traction. Keenan Allen. Man, look at the career this guy has had. More than 12,000 receiving yards, 6 Pro Bowls, 13 NFL seasons, and even at this stage of his career, he still outproduced Jennings last year in both catches and receiving yards. He posted 81 receptions and 777 yards. This guy can still ball. Now the biggest thing here isn't even the production itself, it's the fit. Keenan Allen fits this Vikings offense extremely well. Extremely well. He works short and intermediate routes better than almost anyone from his generation. Reliable hands, elite feel for space, ridiculously smart against zone coverage. And on third down, oh yeah, he's still a serious problem for defenses. That kind of reliability can save drives, and saved drives can change games. Meanwhile, Jennings brings more of a physical identity. Strong blocker, tough through contact, dangerous near the goal line. But the price tag is starting to look way too heavy for where the Vikings currently stand. Because let's think about this realistically. Justin Jefferson already takes up major cap space. Jordan Addison is eventually going to become more expensive. TJ Hawkinson could become a free agent later on. And there's still uncertainty surrounding Kyler Murray on this one-year contract. If Murray fits Kevin O'Connell's system perfectly, great, problem solved. But what if he doesn't? The franchise may need to spend heavily at quarterback all over again next offseason, so spending nearly $20 million on a third receiver right now could become a financial nightmare later. And honestly, Keenan Allen feels much more aligned with the team's current reality. Short-term contract, more manageable money, proven production, veteran leadership inside the locker room, and no destruction of future flexibility. There's another detail people overlook too often. Smart veterans accelerate offensive development, especially for quarterbacks. Allen understands coverage adjustments, route timing, and defensive leverage at an elite level. That elevates the entire offense. This is the type of fan perspective you only get from people who truly follow every detail of the Vikings roster, because the flashiest name is not always the smartest move. Sometimes the smarter move is the one that keeps the roster breathing. And I'll say this. If Minnesota really walks away from the Jauan Jennings pursuit, that decision could reveal a lot about how this franchise plans to build the roster moving forward. Tell me in the comments, Would you rather have Jawan Jennings or Keenan Allen in this purple and gold offense? The Vikings' search for a new general manager is starting to take a much clearer shape now. And after the latest information coming out from inside the building, it feels like Minnesota already has a preferred direction in mind. Not officially, but when multiple insiders start pointing the same way, there's usually a reason people start listening. And once again, Terrence Gray's name is right in the middle of the conversation. Except now, the discussion has become even bigger. Albert Breer recently shared an interesting update about how the Vikings may be viewing the structure of their football operations moving forward. Instead of simply hiring a traditional GM and handing that person total control, the idea may involve splitting responsibilities, almost like an internal partnership. One side focused heavily on scouting and roster evaluation, the other side featuring Rob Brzezinski handling operations, finances, and organizational structure. And honestly, that sounds exactly like the type of setup Vikings ownership would love, because the Wilfs value stability above everything else. They hate the feeling of dysfunction inside the building, and a lot of people around the league view Brzezinski as one of the most respected people inside that organization. There's even a growing debate among reporters and fans right now. Should he just get the job permanently? That's where things get heated. A lot of people first associate Rob Brzezinski with the financial side of football. Salary cap management, contracts, negotiations. But anyone who truly follows NFL front offices knows the guy has spent decades inside football meetings. He's not disconnected from the roster at all. And let me tell you, there are respected voices in Minnesota media openly supporting the idea. Chip Scoggins recently said Brzezinski does a tremendous job connecting the coaching staff with the football operations department. And that matters a lot in today's NFL, because talent without internal chemistry doesn't win Super Bowls. Just look at how many talented teams implode because of ego clashes. Another major part of this story involves Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. More and more, it feels like both coaches gained enormous influence over roster decisions, especially Flores on the defensive side, so Minnesota may be looking for a GM who embraces that collaborative structure instead of fighting against it, and that's where Terrence Gray fits perfectly. He developed inside collaborative systems. He worked in Minnesota before. Then he joined Buffalo and became part of one of the NFL's most successful rebuilds in recent memory. That carries real weight during interviews. It also gives Minnesota a candidate who understands both old roots and new league trends. And honestly, I think the Vikings are trying to prevent internal power struggles before they even begin. That could end up being an extremely smart decision, because while fans focus only on the field, championship organizations usually win behind the scenes first. Good structure usually builds good football teams. Weak structure wastes talented ones. Now, you know what makes this even heavier? While Minnesota is trying to reshape leadership and redefine the future of the franchise, another situation inside the quarterback room is suddenly drawing attention again, and it involves a name a lot of people had almost forgotten after last season. A lot of people had practically written this guy off after last season. And honestly, after the shoulder injury situation, you could understand why fans were nervous. Because whenever a quarterback goes through surgery during the season and disappears from the field like that, doubt naturally follows. But Carson Wentz is back talking like someone who truly believes he can still help this football team. According to his latest update, the shoulder is basically fully recovered. The surgery went well. Rehab went well too. And based on Wentz's own words, he feels ready to roll heading into the 2026 season. That completely changes the atmosphere inside this quarterback room, because now the Vikings have Kyler Murray arriving on a one-year contract. They have J.J. McCarthy trying to finally prove he can take control of this offense, and they also have Wentz returning healthy to compete for a role. In other words, the competition is going to get intense. And that matters more than some people want to admit, because quarterback rooms can either sharpen a team or create confusion fast. And here's what's wild. Last season, once Wentz tried to play through the injury, everything started falling apart quickly. That performance against the Chargers basically ended any chance of stability at that point. Then came surgery, then came the end of his season, and Minnesota had to scramble for backup solutions. But now the situation looks completely different. Wentz returned on a one-year, $3 million contract. That's not superstar money, that's low-risk money. But healthy veteran quarterbacks always hold value in the NFL, especially on a roster clearly trying to become a serious NFC contender again. If he's healthy, he gives Minnesota insurance. If the room gets messy, he gives them experience. But the most interesting part of this story might not even be Carson Wentz. Because at the same time the quarterback room is getting attention, there's also growing buzz around Jacoby Thomas. And naturally, Brian Flores becomes a huge part of that conversation. Will Ragatz recently compared the rookie to Texans safety Jalen Petery. And hold on, because that's not some small comparison. Petere has become one of the most aggressive safeties in football over the past few years. The guy hits hard, blitzes constantly, forces mistakes, and plays with non-stop intensity. And when you look at Jacoby Thomas's traits, you can definitely see some similarities. 5 interceptions during his final college season. Constant pressure, aggressive mentality, relentless energy attacking the football. Flores absolutely loves defenders built like that. He really does. Now, obviously, nobody is saying the rookie already is Jalen Peter. Relax. But if Thomas becomes even 70 to 80% of that type of player, the Vikings absolutely nailed this pick. And let me say this directly. Stories like this hit passionate fan bases differently because quarterbacks generate headlines. But aggressive defenses win big games in January. That is the part people cannot ignore. This is the kind of mix between roster insight, behind-the-scenes context, and emotional fan perspective that people who live and breathe Vikings football look for during the offseason. And honestly, when you combine an intense quarterback battle, structural changes inside the front office, possible offensive reinforcements, and Brian Flores building another physical defense, it really starts to feel like Minnesota is preparing for a much bigger shift than most people imagined just a few months ago. And just look at everything happening in Minnesota right now. The offense is trying to add more weapons. The front office is reshaping the future of the franchise. The quarterback room is heating up with real competition, and Brian Flores is building an even more aggressive defense. This doesn't feel like a normal offseason. It feels like preparation for a massive identity shift. The most interesting part is that the Vikings are trying to balance urgency and patience at the same time, and that's incredibly difficult in today's NFL. Move too fast and you burn resources. Wait too long and the window starts closing. That is the tension around this team right now. Now I want to hear your take on all of this. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football. Because one thing I truly believe is this: this purple and gold team is entering one of the most important stretches it has faced in years. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.